Charge what you charge because you're worth it. You're worth all of that. You're worth all of your experience in life, your experience in as a human, but as a vocalist, and in just managing all of those factors so that in the moment you can connect and do a good job.
That is so good. Ready to go learn how to live healthier, wealthier and wiser as an artist in showbiz? Hey, I'm Lara Bianca Pilcher. I'm crazy about helping artists to live out their creative dreams and nurture themselves at the foundation of their creative career. I'm an artist and actor and showbiz educator with over 20 years in the arts and entertainment industry in London, Australia, and now Atlanta, USA. I'm here to show you how to navigate this topsy-turvy world called showbiz, uncover the secrets of success, unlocking the powerful artist you are. I've done a lot, performed, worked in TV, film, radio, stage, produced, directed, choreographed, acting, singing, voice work, musical theatre, dance company, toured, moved, casting, auditioned, self-tape, teaching, press, critics, branding, marketing, side hustles, and all the hoo-ha, while maintaining a happy marriage with 2 gorgeous kids. And there will only be real talk here, friends. Think of this podcast as a masterclass in helping you build your creative career, while also learning how to holistically navigate the artist's life. This is the Healthy, Wealthy, Wise Artist Podcast. Well, this is going to be a fun episode, and we're talking about what injuries take performers, and we're not just talking about one kind of performer. What takes them out or makes it very difficult for them? And I'm going to ask performers specialist, physical therapist, physiotherapist in some sides of the world, Andrew Pilcher, who's also my husband, but he is right here with me.
Hey.
His CV is off the chart. I mean, we're talking working with BBC Films in London, over 150 West End musicals in London, which is the Broadway of London for those who don't know, which would be weird if you didn't. But he's actually now based in the US, working with a company that works with the Marvel films and a lot of Netflix films, as well as
All
Broadway.
Broadway and all the touring shows in the US. But in London, I had the privilege to work with Coldplay and work with a lot of recording artists.
Yeah.
So Lulu Kennedy Cairns and some big names who are connected in that music world. And the opera scene too, so it goes on.
And some pretty famous actors too. I remember when you were on Sherlock with Benedict Cumberbatch's cast there, and Harry Potter and a few of the actors from those sorts of shows. But being based here in the USA, he's working with USA-based companies, which is cool. But he also trains physical therapists in how to work with performers, and he's worked with a lot of artists himself. So this man knows performers. He's also been up to Nashville a lot, right?
Yeah.
And working in recording studios with musicians and singers, singer-songwriters.
Yeah.
Particularly helping. You've got a niche area there, don't you?
Yeah, I work with the voice. So it's in the area of muscle tension dysphonia, if you want listening from a clinical standpoint, but the voice problems and physiotherapy or physical therapy to help that side of things. It overlaps a little in voice coaching, but it is principally hands-on work to the throat to help vocalists.
And of course, the voice is important for not just singers, but actors, voice artists, and a lot of the other people that listen to this podcast. But we're going to talk about actors, dancers, singers, musicians, voice artists, and circus artists for one word for the most common area of struggle physically for each. You guys try and guess. I'll give you like 3 seconds to guess. We'll play a game and then Andrew will do it. Okay, so dancers. 3, 2, 1. What is it, Andrew?
So I'm reading on recent research, older research, and that's my background to look statistically what the right answer is, but also what I've seen through my career. But my one word is ankle and foot. Sorry, that's 2 words.
And you were saying to me earlier that it was in the musical theatre area, is that right?
Well, we have to split this one up to be dancers in the contemporary dance world and or professional dance world, be it ballet or professionally dance companies, or the musical theatre industry, which there are a different epidemiology and a different statistical basis to injuries. So I'd say in the musical theatre world, there will be a bit more varied between ankle and knee.
Oh, I love that. Of course you would know that. Right, let's talk about singers, which might be a little bit obvious to the listeners. What do you think it is? No, let's go with Andrew.
So you all thought voice, didn't you? But would it be probably more principally stress and anxiety type problems and neck issues.
Okay, we're going to talk about this in a moment. But musicians, again, we'd probably be able to guess. Take a guess, audience. What is it, Andrew?
Probably wrist and forearm problems. Those guitarists,
Yeah, we're talking RSI and other things, strain.
Those repetitive strain type problems, yeah.
Okay, voice artists, as in voice actors, voiceover work. What?
Neck.
Ah,
Neck problems.
not the voice, the neck. This is so interesting. And what about circus performers? We're talking at the elite level of Cirque du Soleil and that kind of. What do you think?
Well, there is some published research from Cirque, so thank you, Cirque, for that. But there's a lot less research in the circus world. In my experience, it would be shoulder.
That makes sense.
But generally, circus listeners, there's a lot less injuries in the circus world. So well done.
That is amazing. But they train so hard. Like we were just at Cirque du Soleil together, weren't we, honey? And we were in the VIP experience. Oh my goodness, it was magical. And
Wow.
They are just epic. You guys, if you're listening, you're just epic. You're amazing. Okay, Andrew, has anyone lost their career as a performer? This is a dumb question because of course they have, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Who has lost their career that you know as a performer and why?
Ooh, this one's tough. Because in this area of an injury or injuries, we're geared and trained, and my whole life is towards sustaining someone's life and their
Career
quality
life.
of life.
Yes, the quality of life.
So my training and my purpose is geared towards improving someone's quality of life and making their career the best it can be and their body the best they can be. So when this has happened for sure, when there's been injury that has just rambled on and has built up to this place where the person can't continue in their career, it is absolutely soul crushing, and I wear that as the therapist too, and so I'm journeying through that with the person, and yeah, so it's very difficult to talk about, but I'll talk about someone I treated, and I can't say where or what show they were on, or their name or what area. Well, I'll say there was a knee injury, so there was some flipping in a show, and there was a bad landing a little bit because of some partnering work and that sort of thing, and so there was a nasty injury in this person's knee, and they went ahead and had a look at having some surgery, and that went very well. So there was some time off show, and surgery went really well. But afterwards, they were talking about their rehabilitation. All things were going well from my side. They went to the surgeon, and the surgeon said some very soul-crushing words.
Oh, no.
And then this was not medically or clinically true at all. But he looked at him and said, okay, so I'm just looking at timelines. And then the surgeon looked at him and just said, you're not going to dance again.
Oh, wow.
And that was not true at all. We were just like dumbfounded.
Hey, I want to interrupt this episode for just a minute to give a shout out to some gorgeous people who left me a 5-star written review. Thank you, Terry Oliver, Chipper19, J Monty611, Bethany Wilson, Ali Emma, Artist KJD, Marion in LA, London 2, Amy Parks, Iana Grant, 97, and Starbucks Lovin', as well as Mariah Hardy. Hey guys, thank you so much. They're just the American ones, and there's plenty more that have left 5-star reviews. You can do that. Head to Apple Podcasts, to my show, scroll to the bottom, tap 5 stars. Easy peasy. I'm going to read out some other country reviews in the next break.
So I had some very strong words with the surgeon afterwards.
Yeah.
I had a good authority to do so. We knew the surgeon, and that changed that relationship in the positive. But this performer did not progress well after that, and it somehow just had this very strong effect. And this
words
did
can
not
be
progress.
so destructive, and especially if you believe that you're in danger and you're not going to be able to recover. And that's why I love what you do, Andrew, because you're actually a specialist with performers, and quite often where one person that doesn't understand the bodies of performers like you do will say, it's a death sentence. Your job is getting performers back up on stage or back on mic or back up to do their tour or their show quickly, because that's what you do. And after many years of seeing very similar things, don't you, that that just has to happen. Like you know when to call it.
Yeah.
I'll come back to that question at the end, though, about when do you call it and when do you not?
Oh, I love that question.
Such a good question. So hang in there for that.
Messy.
Okay, let's talk about dances for a minute. They'll break it down. And what's a story of one show and one issue you dealt with?
Right, so in a dance world in Melbourne, I was treating a dancer with a contemporary dance company, and there was an ankle injury they had, and this is, you're going to think it's an ankle rolling injury, aren't you? But it was actually more pain in the back of the ankle, so that's probably the more typical dance ankle problem rather than just rolling the ankle, which does happen. But posterior ankle impingement is a very common occurrence and very big thing for dancers. And that is just whether you're getting irritation, over frictioning and inflammation in the back part, nearly the Achilles tendon in that back part of the ankle.
Yeah.
And so I was helping her on, and so we were doing all of our rehab, and I have a very holistic approach to get the most out of dancing while going through the treatment and getting treatment and sort of getting back to function on it. And so we got her back quicker than she's kind of experienced before, which was fantastic. But I think it was the fun and the difficult thing was managing being the lead of the show and the stresses involved with that.
Yeah.
And stresses from the company management and whatnot. And it was just managed very well, but it just was a lot on her plate and a lot on her shoulders.
So you're talking psychologically when they come in, pain affects the psyche, right?
Yeah.
In a huge way.
Absolutely.
And that's something you're quite passionate about, that area,
my
right?
approach is just that there is this interlink in our soul, in the deep parts of us, and I still just work as a physical therapist or physiotherapist to treat problems and to go from that physical standpoint, but there is such an intermelding. And so that's my area of passion, to kind of see and just to speak into that a little bit, to bring some of that all together. I'm not a psychologist, but just to bring all of it together, to know how can I give enough attention to really what's going on, and do I need to deal with something else and see another professional because I need some more help in that area, rather than just the physical things or whatever, and just to look at diet and look at nutrition and look at all the things that's going to help me to just thrive and do the best I can with where this is. But we were able to fast track the whole thing with this injury and just use the right bits of taping and offloading with footwear, and it just really pushed her along so much better. So yeah, that was fun.
Yeah, I think about what you're saying, and just, how, series regulars that are just having to learn lines, get them out, perform. If something goes wrong with their voice or another part of the body, how difficult it is, because essentially you can't understudy somebody on film, because it's not like a show where you can have second cover, third cover. So that gets really, really tricky, doesn't it? But we'll come back to that in a minute.
This situation, this performer was the lead, and there wasn't the situation in this company of an understudy. So there was that added pressure of like, well, we're just going to have to push on through. And it was the injury that was indicated, that was a safe thing to do injury-wise. It's just going to make it a slower process. So that's always on our chart to be looking at. Is this a safe thing? Do we need to call this? All those sort of situations. And in that world, in this dance company, in that situation, and there are many around the world in that situation, the sort of professional ballet company will have a different setup. And there's a nicer setup from an injury point of view. And that's great, because the loading is different. Just different loading. There's a different day-to-day workup of classes and loading and things that the ballerinas and ballet professional ballet dancers go through to the musical theatre world. Both are busy, both are very high loading.
There's a load on both of them.
Different, and there's different way it's set up. The musical theatre world has a lot of understudy capability, but within the companies sometimes there ain't. So there's a lot of getting through and whatnot. And it's mixed with the sort of injuries in musical theatre world, and the dancers there is a little different because of the type of choreography. So this is all mixed, and I'm probably getting into different areas here. But the understudy situation really changes the course of an injury.
Of course, because it allows you downtime, doesn't it? Time to rest. And, we've worked, and Andrew as well, he's worked in London in the West End, but he's worked in Melbourne in the theatre scene there. and also in the film and music scene in both these places, and now in the US. And really, it's the same everywhere, isn't it? It's not like one country or one particular environment has more issues.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, it's the same. Okay, let's talk about singers for a minute. What would you say is an issue that you've dealt with a lot with singers?
So we would think, how do they get through things with their voices, and surely their voice injuries. I think longer term in a vocalist's life, just like someone who does a lot of intricate things with their hands, they'll go through some degree of hand problem or hand related issue most likely in their life, right? So a vocalist would have some degree of managing some vocal rest or something where they will have to recover and all that. But I think what affects showmen and band members and vocalists heading bands up or performers on shows would be things like their neck, and they can they've got their pipes entwined, they're singing pipes, but the neck injury will just affect their movement, will affect things. And so a little morsel here is that the neck strongly affects vocal performance and vocal clarity, or phonation, easy phonation, and the degree of laryngeal mobility and tension build up and that sort of thing. So there's a very direct relationship between neck pain, and more so when you have neck pain and or tension, postural issues and that sort of thing, and laryngeal mobility. And you want as free tension through that laryngeal region as you can, because you want freedom of movement, the subtle, small degree of motion through there that you need to place your voice a bit differently and just place the resonance you want and play with your voice as easy as you want it vocally. So if there's neck issue kind of going on, it can hit the voice, but it really just can affect the way you hold yourself. The pain really gets at your head, so you're just not thinking straight to give everything to that performance you can.
Yeah.
And to this point that I was treating, I treat very much holistically to look at the neck, then a bit down towards the ribs and the mid-back as well. So I think this performer laughed afterwards and would say, I got through those performances, but I mean, the ice really helped. I was putting some ice on, and I said, between the acts or something, between Act 1 and Act 2. They said, no, through the show. I said, how did you manage that? And she had a corset on. So she said that she was stuffing frozen peas inside of her costuming, shall we say.
That's fantastic.
I was like, wow. So, I mean, bravo to the costume ladies.
So she hit those notes because she was cold?
Bravo to the costume ladies who are doing all the washing every night, because frozen peas everywhere, man.
The show must go on. Let's talk for a minute about musicians and, one of the stories you've experienced. This is huge because when we talk about singers, we're also talking about anyone that uses their voice, but you're working with performers that, might be belting out 8 shows a week, musicians that are doing a show every day. So there's really opportunity for repetitive strain and those sorts of things, isn't there?
Absolutely, yeah. The biggest thing in musicians, and if you're a musician and you're listening, you get it, but it's usually if I ask, how many times a week do you do exercise? Do you do anything for fun? And I phrase it like that because typically
they don't.
So regular. So the musicians listening now are looking at me kind of going, what is that?
What's exercise?
And literally they'll ask, what is that? And I'm like, seriously? But yeah, this one good situation was that through the show, the length of the show in London that was happening, these musicians really got an idea that they had to do a bit more with their bodies. And it was through conversations with myself and with other therapists and whatnot, and just in their own interest, etc. So some of them went on a bit of a running sort of training process, but at one stage, just because I mentioned how if you work on your core stability, that'll help with this neck or rib thing that they were dealing with, but I was dealing with their forearm and elbow as well, and so I was managing that, but that really needed them to commit to doing a little bit of light loading through the tendons, some exercises quite regularly, and so they saw the benefit of it and it really helped. So they were like, right, we'll get it. And they got a little band, TheraBand we call it, wrapped around them, and between acts they would sort of get that going, and then it progressed towards clearing a bit of space and just doing a few exercises. And then really quickly between them they had an incentive program. They had a gluteal muscle and an abdominal sort of challenge amongst the whole pit area. They cleared all of the area so that the band members and the musicians that wanted to go and drink a little pint of beer between acts, they would run off to the pub and then they'd clear the space out, and they'd have therabands, they had music kind of playing, they had like challenges to say how many sit-ups and planks can you do and this sort of thing, and we were like, how is this happening? And I was like, I want to come and join in. This is great. But they really worked on their core. They, got such in control and in autonomy of their problems. It was just awesome.
That sounds like a place you want to be. Good work ethic or morale. Oh my goodness, another little tiny interruption because there's some Australian reviews as well on Apple Podcasts. I just want to thank J. David, Loz Jane G, Bish, Chris, and Bluebird03. Thanks for those reviews, guys. Right, voice artists. Let's talk about some voice artists that you've worked with. I mean, this can be actors or people that basically do voice work as a career, which most people do in their closets these days. It's a booming area.
Absolutely.
But tell me about actors and the voice and voice artists.
Yeah, well, usually the ones I've seen have been doing some show or some acting role in a show, which isn't maybe a full-time time constraint unless you're in the rehearsal phase of the show, re-rehearsing in new role members, new cast members and that sort of thing. But they will do on the side some voice acting, doing some book reading or reading for something, as a audio script or whatever. And so some days would be long, 6-hour days of recording, and there might be a few days of that, and they schedule it for weeks on end, so they've got quite a busy vocal sort of life. And again, you're thinking, how do they manage? But vocalists and singers, I think you relate to this. All of their life is about their pipes doing well.
Yeah, that's true.
And maintaining that, getting their headspace in the right place, kind of managing what friends they have, how much they go out at night and what they drink, what they eat.
It's a big deal.
It's a big deal. And most of them are pretty entwined with this makes it all work and this doesn't, and I've got to cut out what doesn't, And there are some extremely a bit more frantic and anxious about it all, but others just find their groove and they sit in it and they're really diligent. So I want to value you guys, if you're listening, that like when someone books a gig and they're getting a singer in to do a gig at a wedding, value yourself enough to charge what you need to charge, because they're not paying for you to sing some notes. They're not paying for you because you've got a band together that's been together so long. They're paying for you because you can get that on a certain date at a certain time, because you can manage your life so that if you have a cold 2 weeks early, you can get over it. You can do the things to manage that. If you've had some work 2 days early, you can recover well and sort of get things back on track, or you're not getting over emotional, so you're getting sort of frantic and in the moment just not connecting well and doing well to sing in that moment and sing what you need to sing, to story tell and do the wonderful things you do as singers. So I'm just valuing you to say charge what you need to charge, because you're worth it. You're worth all of that. You're worth all of your experience in life, your experience in as a human, but as a vocalist, and in just managing all of those factors so that in the moment you can connect and do a good job.
That is so good. I'm so glad you said that.
Noting back to that, like, I've treated this gentleman's neck, and it was a degree of neck restriction and tightness. He could manage his voice fairly well, but he could notice how sitting for hours on end, and he would really just go into interesting postures, because he probably wasn't doing that as much as getting on stage and being free to kind of move around and walk around. So managing that was interesting, how much that affected the vocalizing, and it got tired a little quickly, thinking what, and we could really test out some of the patterns that vocalizing. He was doing good things, and he had good scope to kind of recover well vocally and the muscles involved, but the neck was the restricted thing. So I could just treat that, had to kind of treat enough to find the main issue there and the driving issue, not just treat the muscles and get it a bit looser and get him through a few days after seeing me, but getting to the root of the issue. And that was awesome. It was good.
Let's talk about circus and circus artists, who you said at the start about shoulders. What's a story from a show or a performer you've worked with and that particular area of the body?
Well, the circus ones, if you're listening, you know what I'm saying, where often you won't always listen to the advice and you go, yeah, well, I can kind of get back, soon. I'm a bit of a Superman, aren't I? And shoulders are a more typical thing I've seen a lot of, but generally, like I say, there is just a lot less injuries in the data we can see in research around the literature to sort of see the less injuries compared to the dance world. But it might be a limitation on it in studies. But anyway, getting to this, so it's a shoulder issue that this person had, and shoulder issues where there is a bit of soft tissue related restriction, irritation. The shoulder's a tricky joint and a tricky area to get better. A lot of dynamics with the scapula moving, quite mobile, and the shoulder, we move that joint the most out of all the joints in our body. So it's got the most movement
involved. I did not know that. That is interesting.
So also, they would probably look at me and sort of say, what stretch is this going to sort it out so I can get on? And I'm like, you got to understand, we've got a 4 to 5 week process where we've got to let the irritation settle down and get some deeper muscles here stronger so they can manage with what you're going to do here. And he wasn't completely off, so there was a bit of a training, doing a little item and a little bit of performing, but it was just killing him not to get back and do the tricks and the things he wanted. So there was definitely a different narrative at work compared to what he told me going on. I was definitely gearing exercises to be really functional, and so our exercises weren't just kind of some pulling TheraBands and lifting some weights in different ways. It was very fun, like having a foam roller on the ground and hitting a plank and push-up position, one hand on the roller, one hand on the ground, and rolling the roller from hand to hand. So that was kind of fun. And then he kind of wanted to flick up into a handstand. So I was like, let's just look at your control here. Let's just load through here. So there was like pitching it back to what he needed to do for the rehab point of view was difficult. And there was we had to just sit in between what I wanted and what he wanted in a little middle and just watch it really closely. And we got there. It was really nice.
So tell me on all of this is, what's the heal time? Obviously everything's different to get back on the show. When do you push through and when do you stop?
I mean, big question. And definitely a good thing to go on here is to not just Google something and trust your experience as performers. Definitely really look around the local area you have, or zoom into therapists that might have a bit more experience in your area and your genre and your sort of area of the arts and that sort of thing, because they'll have the experience to know what rigors you're under and what you need to get through, and some of that logistics. If you see a therapist more in sports, they're going to have their perspective. They'll probably be smart enough to think, so what are you going to be going through the next 2 weeks, and help you work it out. But often they'll just go on their default to know what they're used to. So definitely try and sort of find a therapist. And usually if you're really blown up with an injury and you're thinking, oh gosh, if it's a few days afterwards that you go and see someone, that's a better time.
Okay.
Say big ankle injury or something where you let the inflammation settle down, so we can see a bit more. What is this looking like for 2 weeks ahead? What are we looking at as far as your management? So you get a bit more out of that session to get a bit more
That's good to know.
Type
you
thing.
Don't have to go on the day of.
But definitely, I'd be careful of Googling something and finding information out, where I think it's at the age where Google tells us a lot, and it is proactive and good to kind of do your best with all of that. But therapists have strong training, have specialty training to know the phases of inflammation, to know what sort of problem you have, quickly diagnose for you what's happening. And I think the diagnosis is the key, to know what injury is this, what is it not. So then do I push through and sort of get through this thing, or what can I hold back? And so in my career, it's definitely been, how do I juggle all of that to hold back enough and to know what things are really going to flare this and not, and hold that space a little bit.
Oh my goodness. I also just want to do a shout out to the UK, Evie Page 1982 for your 5-star review, and Lorna on tour. Thank you so much. Hey, if I haven't called out your name, it's because I haven't looked up your country. So get on my DMs, social media, Lara Bianca Pilcher on Instagram or Facebook or Twitter, and say, Lara, you didn't call out my name, tell me your country, and I will do it in episode 7.
So no easy answers there, sorry.
Yeah, and there's probably none on this one, but how do you know what's preventative and what's maintenance? You know what I mean? Like all of that kind of, you always say when there's pain, there's normally weakness or compensation.
Yeah. I mean, not always weakness, but quite typically there are areas that are weaker, muscle groups that are weaker that the performer doesn't know about.
I hate when he says it's weak.
I think I recollect that being when we were dating.
Because I was dancing full time then, and I was like, don't you dare say I'm weak. Do you know how much I'm working out and how much I'm training?
And I looked and I went, oh gosh.
You don't call a dancer weak, are you crazy?
I phrased that completely wrong.
But of course, to a physiotherapist or physical therapist, they're talking in a different way.
Talking like a bit
balances.
more.
Yeah.
Muscle balances. That muscle's weaker than this one. And we got to work on that. Look, we can get this better. It's good.
Yeah.
Where it's like...
It's all right, I forgive you. It was a long time ago.
But for me, preventative and maintenance-based work is the same kind of thing. And it's all very important. So I think thinking of your body, if you've got access to a therapist, if you've got some insurance to help or work can help you, I think the encouragement is really hone into your body and see it like if I've got some help available or I can just kind of invest in my body a little bit to work on things. If you know that one side of your hip area is wonky or just it's always a bit off there and I know how to get around it and manage it to some degree, you might say, but if I can get some therapy on it, some work on it, to actually work out where's that coming from, that could be an easy fix. That could be an ezy answer to say, do these sort of exercises, this muscle's weak, yes, or tight, or I might say it more comfortably than saying weak, but but find some root issues to do with that, or just teach you how to warm up a bit differently before performing, which often it's just we just get into ruts, and there's a culture in stretching in dance that I'm happy to be working towards changing, to just not stretch too long and all the time and that sort of thing. But just to look at things a bit differently, use it like a preventative thing, an investment in your body, and go for it. The little niggles, the little things that are a little bit off or a little bit problematic, if you go and see someone about to really explore, have I really done everything I can for that? Your body is your tool. I say there's sort of the temple that we do all things from. It's a very important resource. It's your it's what you do it all with, and you don't look after it, then it will tend to knock on. And
yeah, that's so true. Well, who's liable to pay? Obviously, you've worked in different places, and it's going to be different from theatre to film. But generally, what have you seen? Who's liable if you're on a show and in a contract? Obviously, if you're not in a contract, then no one's liable with these injuries.
Yeah. So in my time in London and in those arts industries, it's usually that performers outside of being in a full-time show aren't well paid. They're doing, hustle jobs. They're doing things on the side and all that sort of thing. And so they're usually not finding the enough money to come privately to a clinic and see someone specialty.
Yeah, that's true, and it's expensive.
But typically the shows would pay, and in my time in London, at least, I don't know too much currently, and not at liberty to say right now in this year of in West End area, but it was often that the company would want to pay and look after, and they would have regular sessions with therapists for the performers to be seen. So this was like a highlight. Oh, I'm on a show, so I can get some help,
treatment.
Rather than insurance, I think the insurance was just sticky and interesting to do. So I think that was the idea, but it was always covered from one or the other. But generally, this sort of show. And Melbourne theatre scene was similar. It was like some mix of the two or something, but it was that the show would look after it. But it was an interesting conversation. Sometimes the show management would be saying to the performer, well, part of seeing someone and getting help would be your responsibility. You're a performer, you're a dancer, all these things. And so that was valid conversation and difficult,
that's hard,
and just often, sometimes we get it, performers, it just comes down to finance, right? Sometimes, and so you can afford what you can afford and that sort of thing. But interesting. And whereas here in the USA, it's often the company that is sorting things out and has some sort of therapist involved with the company for that reason to manage all of that. I would say in that area, shows in London, Melbourne, and through America are taking a lot of responsibility, management companies and production companies, to look after injuries and look after the cast members. And so it is amazing to see such proactive and such care for the performer, whereas maybe in the culture of the performing arts wasn't so back in the 60s,
You just
70s.
look at the old films and it's like, work harder, I'm injured, keep going, it's 2 a.m, keep going.
Absolutely.
Thank goodness times have changed, right?
Yeah.
And where you're working now, of course, with NeuroTour, which is got a clinic in London and a clinic in New York and a clinic in Atlanta, Georgia, and has PTs out on tours all across the US. They actually have their own physical therapist or massage therapist on the show with them that comes through from your company, which is amazing, isn't it?
There's a mix, and I've got responsibility and the pleasure to be involved with shows that have a therapist that they get involved locally, and we have a network around America that we can find a therapist that we've trained a little or had something to do with, so we know how they work, they know how we work, and so they know how treating performers goes a bit better and how to do that better to make sure some degree of consistency happens. And then some shows have full-time PTs with them, full-time through the week to treat before the show, in the show, all that sort of thing, and it's a really awesome setup. So it's a privilege to be part of that thing here.
Did you hear him go American? He's done that a few times.
Here,
he's a little bit British, a little bit Australian, and a little bit American, and now a little bit Southern.
I do say dances, though. I
You didn't say
that.
y'all yet.
Mm-hmm.
I've said that once. Anyway, guys, if you want to see Andrew, you can obviously book a session with him if you're in Georgia or Nashville, because he's up there a lot. But you can also go to larabiancapilcher.com and message me, because we live together, Andrew and I, and we're married. And right now I'm enjoying snuggling up to him while we do this interview, which is, work perks. And you can reach out to do a Zoom session with him, ask him questions. Obviously, he can't put hands on in a Zoom session, but he often does things like that for performers.
That's actually been really useful.
Yeah.
I've been able to help vocalists and things to do some self-massage work around the throat, but even just advise, what do I need to do some voice rest? Are there some simple vocal rehab ideas to go through and point them in the direction of good SLT, speech pathology type sort of specialists to see things?
Yeah. Well, anyway, guys, with you on the journey. You want to say it too, babe?
With you on the journey.
Until next time. Bye, friends. Hey, on my Facebook, there is a Healthy, Wealthy, Wise Artists group made up of a tribe of artists seeking to live the healthy, wealthy, wise artist life. They ask each other questions and throw around ideas. You can join the Healthy, Wealthy, Wise Artist Community private Facebook group at Lara Bianca Pilcher on Facebook under Groups. Phew, today's masterclass is done. I love reaching back and saying I've done this and helping you learn the easy way. If you want more, head to larabiancapilcher.com for show notes, links, freebies, my blog, coaching and courses, and you can also head to my socials, Lara Bianca Pilcher on Instagram and Facebook. I'm also on Twitter and Pinterest. Thanks again for listening. Please leave a review on Apple Podcasts. That would mean the world to me, and I'll give you a shout out. And of course, keep on living the healthy, wealthy, wise artist living towards your dream life. Bye, friends. P.S. Shout out to my hottie hubby, Andrew Pilcher, who does all the editing on this podcast.